This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end of our elaborate plans, the end of everything that stand, the end. No safety, end.
Thank you, Ron. That was Ron Solberg, our worship associate this week. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Unitarian Church of Hinsdale. I'm Dave Lloyd, a member of the congregation. Our regular Sunday services are led by our minister, Pam Rumancic. If you enjoyed today's service, share the news on social media and in person with your friends. The church has a lot going on, and you can find out what's up at our website, www.hinsdaleunitarian.org. If you're new and would like to receive regular communications about what's on, you can type your contact information in the chat or contact the church by clicking the contact button on YouTube or the church website. Each week, those who participate in the service on Zoom are welcome to stay after the service in our chat rooms, where you can discuss the service or just catch up with your church friends. And today, Sunday, right after church at noon on the church lawn, don't miss our high impact kinetic service. Sometimes meditation or just going to your happy place isn't enough. At the end of a year like we've had, sometimes you just need to get up and break something. Our high impact kinetic service gives us the opportunity to bust up, tear up, and mangle the symbols of this God-forsaken year 2020. Those computer monitors that have brought you here, we're going to smash them. This whole year 2020, we'll have several sets of 2020 numerals to cut, tear, shred. I understand some red neckties are ready to be cut into ribbons. And we might even go after the virus itself. That's today at noon at church with proper social distance and fully masked for about half hour of violent worship. Today's service is the work of many people, including worship associate, Jamie Pastman, music and technical production, Gene Schaefer, technical production, Pam Fodor, tools and fire, and our chalice lighters this week are River and James. And now let's enjoy a musical interlude.
As we light our chalice, we share our church covenant. We promise to listen and learn together with compassion, curiosity, and an open mind. Engage in a creating and warm and welcoming community. Work together beyond our walls to address social and environmental challenges, and with our time, talent, and treasure, its mission.
Close your eyes. Put your feet flat on the floor. Or if you're on your couch in your jammies, tuck them under you. I don't care. Take a deep breath in. Let a deep breath out. Think of a great new beginning you remember. Maybe a new job, maybe the first morning of married life, maybe the first day of school, maybe the first night in your new home. What did you wear? What did you lay out on your desk? Pictures, knickknacks, stapler? What mental armor did you put on? What new school supplies did you get to open? What did you decide was the first thing you were going to do? Now consider this coming year of hope and change. What will we do to get ready for the next chapter? Let's sharpen our pencils. Break out the coffee mug. Kiss a loved one. Stiffen the sinews. Summon up the blood. All things are ready if our minds be so.
For the past 5 years, our congregation has staffed the DuPage Pads homeless shelter at Redeemer Lutheran Church. We weren't able to do that this year. To keep them safe during the pandemic, Pads in motels. They have 196 people, including 68 children, in 115 motel rooms. Housing and feeding this many people is a huge expense. Homelessness continues to increase as businesses shut down, benefits run out, and evictions increase. Homelessness is a tragedy for anyone, but is especially difficult when it involves families with children. You have been very generous with your time and with your money. Please step up again and support PADS. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Gene Schaefer, serving you on the board of the Unitarian Church of Hinsdale. And this is the time in our service when we remember the good things this church does in the world and invites you to help support that work. You can go to our website at hinsdaleunitarian.org and click the donate button, or you can simply send your check to the church office at 17 West Maple Street in Hinsdale. I'm so proud of the work our UCH family does to improve the universe. We are a community, always learning about the world, offering connections and inspiration, helping our children learn values to sustain lives of meaning and purpose. We work in so many ways to create a more just and peaceful society, and that includes sharing our beautiful space with many outside nonprofit groups, many of whom need a safe space now more than ever. Check our website for all we've done and all the good we continue to do. Your support not only maintains our congregation, but it truly does reach all parts of Earth's community. So thank you. Now, even though we can't be physically together at this time, I invite you to say our offering words with us. This church is made up of all of us. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, the fun we have together. It is what we share with one another, with the people around us, and with all the world.
When you throw in a stone, the ripples go farther and farther, and sometimes you don't know what shore they reach on the other side. If you're kind to somebody, you have no idea how it may change him or her. Reach out to a stranger. Maybe that person is older than you or younger than you. Maybe he or she has a different skin color than you. But just make his or her day a little happier, and you'll be amazed at the change in you.
The title of today's service is Doors and Gates. Our readings today have been selections from 2 songs by Jim Morrison and the Doors. And the reading on kindness is a quote from Melinda Gates. But the title refers to the fact that at this transition from one year to the next, I note that the name of the month January comes from the Roman god Janus, who is the god of doors and gates. January is named after the god Janus because, of course, the passage from one year to the next is like walking through a door or a gate. And why does the new year begin with January 1st? It seems kind of arbitrary. It's 10 days after the winter solstice. Why don't we start the new year right on the solstice, or on the spring equinox in March, or on the first day of February, called Imbolc in olden days, which was the beginning of spring, or on Beltane, the beginning of summer, at the beginning of May? Well, I looked it up. A lot of us have heard that the modern calendar was created by Julius Caesar. He changed the number of days in the months, came up with the leap year, and named one of the months July after himself. And his successor and adopted son, Augustus Caesar, gave his name to August. But the calendar changes started before that. The story is that a Roman king named Numa Pompilius was a big fan of the god Janus, so he moved the start of the year from March 1st, where it had been, to January 1st, the start of Janus's month. And that's why the months at the end of the year have names that don't correspond with their numbers. September is from the Latin word for seven, but it's the 9th month. October means 8, but it's the 10th month, and the same thing for November, which means 9, and December, which means 10. When the year started in March, then September was the 7th month. October was 8th, etc. King Numa Pompilius changed all that. If you look online, you'll see it reported as a fact that Julius Caesar was the one who changed the numbering of the months, and that he added 2 months, January and February, to change the number of months from 10 to 12. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So if the internet can get an uncontroversial historical fact like the Roman calendar so wrong, how can we be surprised when it gets details about, say, Brad Pitt or Jill Biden wrong? What Caesar did do was to change the number of days in each month and standardize the calendar. Before Julius Caesar, the Roman calendar was really weird. The 12 months added up to about 355 days, and every few years the political leaders would just add a month or two to make the dates correspond with the solar year. The Senate or the Council would just say, okay, next year we're going to have an extra month between January and February. Have a good day. So Julius Caesar came along and said, this is goofy. We're going to, in Latin, I don't know how it came out, but he said, this is goofy. We're going to have a standard number of days. By this time, they had figured out that the year was about 365 and a quarter days long. So he set up the number of days in each month that we are familiar with, 30 days, half September, etc., and set February as the shortest month because that's where the leap year would be, every 4 years. And this system worked great throughout the Roman Empire. And eventually, anybody who wanted to trade with the empire used it as well. And it was called the Julian calendar after Julius Caesar. And the month that had been called Quintus, he called July. But the problem was the year is not exactly 365 and a quarter days long. It's just a little bit shorter. You wouldn't notice it year to year or even during your whole lifetime. But every 100 years, the calendar would be almost a day off. Again, no big deal for hundreds of years. But after 1,000 years, the calendar was a week off. In an agricultural society, you have to keep close track of when it was safe to plant in the spring and when it was time to harvest in the fall, among other important climate facts. So political leaders and scientists tried to figure out a solution. And in 1582, the Pope Gregory, got his best scientists together. And they figured out that if they reduced the number of leap years, the system would work just fine. They computed that they would need to drop the leap year every 100 years, and then every 400 years, leave the leap year in. And that's the system we have now. And that's why there was a leap year in 2000, but there wasn't one in 1900, and there won't be one in 2100. This system is good for 10,000 years. So we're good until then. In adopting the new calendar, called the Gregorian calendar after Pope Gregory, in order to take care of the fact that the calendar was now off by 10 days, they skipped 10 days. So it went from October 4th, 1582, right to October 15th. everywhere in Western Europe, except in England. In England, King Henry VIII had broken away from the Catholic Church, and his daughter Elizabeth I was the queen and still feuding with the Pope. So England stayed on the old system. It was like America with the metric system. We like our system, screw you. So if you were going to do business between England and any of the Catholic countries in Europe, you had to write footnotes to designate whether it was the old system or the new system date that you were using. And in England, it wasn't until 1752, 170 years later, in England and the colonies in the New World, they adopted the new calendar. And because the calendar was then 11 days off, they skipped from September 2nd, 1752 to September 14th. And now England and the colonies were on the same date system as the rest of Europe. I like to read books with puzzles and mysteries. And I remember one where a guy has a chance to buy a letter that was supposedly written by George Washington when he was 20 years old. The age of the paper checks out, the chemical composition in the ink checks out, and the handwriting is in the style of George Washington. So the guy goes to his detective friend to have him study the letter and make sure it's genuine. The detective takes one look at the letter and says, "Don't buy it, it's a fake." And how did he know? Because the letter had a date of September 8th, 1752, which didn't take place because it was one of the 11 days that was skipped when adopting the new calendar. All this calendar trivia is by way of explaining why this service is called Doors and Gates. So now I'll start my sermon. First, an apology. A year ago, on December 29, 2019, I presented a service titled, "Don't Worry, Be Unhappy." It was about how we need some bad times in our lives to make us appreciate the good times. I was not talking about a pandemic and financial disaster. So whatever God overheard me, whether Janus or Zeus or Jehovah, that is not what I was talking about, okay? Now, for many of us, maybe most of us, 2020 was the worst year ever. But that's not universal. At work the other day, we had our Christmas lunch, and I went around the table with the what was the best and the worst part of the year game. My one assistant, a young guy that I hired in May, said that getting this job was the best part of the year. Smart kid, knows how to butter up his boss. But he also said that this year had been pretty good for him. He graduated from college, got this new job right away. He and his cousin fixed up an old house, and they finally got it done and finished in the fall, moved in. He's got a girlfriend, he's got a good job. So 2020 has been pretty good for him. And I have a Facebook friend who, when I was talking about how bad 2020 was, reminded me that she had been involved in a major car accident at the beginning of 2019. She was almost killed. She had a serious brain concussion that took months of recovery. She had major depression, her business suffered, and she had to give up singing because it triggered symptoms, and she's still suffering from the effects to this day. So 2020 was not her worst year either. 2019 took that prize. This is useful to provide perspective on this past year, and it reminds me that there is a reason for hope. After all, the message I gave in that sermon last year is that bad news sets an increased focus on the good news. And there is actually a lot that we can be thankful for in this past year. First of all, disastrous times in history are often followed by very good times. After the Great Plague in the 1300s, in which a third to a half of the population in Europe died, there was a long period of economic prosperity. There were fewer people, so there was more land to go around, and wages went up for just about everybody. It was the beginning of the end of serfdom, a type of economic slavery. Before the plague, many or most people were tied to the land and to their jobs, and they were prohibited by law from leaving their village for a new job. If, say, Tom of Abbots Bromley showed up in Hinsdale Ridware, the Lord of Hinsdale Ridware would say, "Who are you?" Tom, where are you from? Abbots Bromley. And the Lord of the manor would call up his buddy, the Lord of Abbots Bromley, and say, hey, I got a guy named Tom here, says he's from your village. And the Lord of Abbots Bromley would say, yeah, he ran off. Hold him there and I'll drive over and pick him up. We need him. He's a good dancer. And that would be it for poor Tom. But after the plague, with serious labor shortages, if Tom showed up at Hinsdale Ridware looking for a job, Lord de Ridware would just hire him, no questions asked, led to the total breakdown of serfdom. Similarly, after wars like World War I and World War II, there were boom times like the Roaring '20s and the prosperity of the '50s and '60s. So this year's economic disaster might lead to a financial boom in the coming year. And there are other things to celebrate from 2020. People marched in the streets for an end to systematic racial discrimination. Americans turned out to vote in record numbers to end the worst presidency in the history of our nation. Racists crawled out from under rocks so that now we know that there's a lot of them and we still have a lot of work to do. People did much less driving, and we may be seeing the beginning of long-term changes in our work habits that will benefit the environment. Just recently, I saw a Ford commercial talking about how you don't get to be a major American car company for 100 years by being resistant to change, and how Ford is moving toward electric vehicles, fuel efficiency, zero emission factories, all to reduce their effect on the climate. Now, I trust big corporations like Ford Motor as far as I can throw them. But the fact that they chose to put out an ad like that shows that these ideas have become mainstream and they need to get in that stream. In the past 2 years, we've seen more ads with families of different races, same-sex couples. The point is that if big business adopts models and images for their ads, these models and images are now the face of America. And if you don't like it, sit down and shut up. And we saw that you can't take democracy for granted. It's a much more fragile gift that takes more care and attention than we thought. And we have to keep working at it and never let our attention flag or fail. Our young people have seen firsthand what a disaster can relate or result from the philosophy of you're on your own. Maybe they'll be vaccinated against selfishness for the future. Our theme at church this month is kindness. I think we may see a boom in kindness in the coming year. Despite the fact that lots of people, as much as a third of the people in this country, are still locked into the me first mentality, the rest of us have witnessed enough of the struggles of our neighbors that we're ready to show more empathy, to help out more. And we have seen how very important close contact with our neighbors truly is. And that 1/3 of the people who aren't with us, I have to say that those people seem really whacked. These are people who really seem to believe that this pandemic is a hoax, that the thousands of people marching for Black Lives Matter were all in the pay of a few rich guys, that Trump won the election by a landslide. Seriously, there are thousands of people who are talking about going to a Trump inauguration in January. I've said this before, but I've given up trying to understand these people. I hope I can forgive them. The way we try to forgive that crazy relative that says offensive things at family gatherings. We can't change them. We can only try to love them despite their madness. Because this cult mindset does seem like a form of mental illness. This past year, it seems like the world has slammed a door in our faces. But when one door closes, you can open it again. It's a door. That's how they work. This coming year, there is a chance, to quote Abraham Lincoln, that this nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And there is a chance that we shall see a new birth of kindness, kindness toward the environment, kindness toward immigrants with children no longer being put in cages, kindness rather than vindictiveness in our foreign policy, with kindness toward everyone we meet, no matter what they look like, what their first language is, or whom they love. This is something we can all do. It's in our reach, and we can do it. All things are ready if our minds be so. And I have one image I want to share with you. This is a video of my favorite president, and his action is what our final response to this plague year should rightly be.
And, you know, you've just got to kind of let it, That's what you got to do. That's what you got to do.
Thank you. Have a happy new year, and I hope to see you at noon today.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of its truth, the warmth of our community, nor the fire of our commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with all the world.
Well, that's our service, the last service of the year. Actually, it's the penultimate service, because as soon as we're finished here, I'm heading over to the church to set up for our high impact kinetic service. Let me get ready. Please join us at noon when we smash, dismember, and eviscerate the remnants of this plague year. That's today at noon at church. Before we go, I'd like to introduce a video. This month, we've been showing videos that members of the congregation have suggested as their favorite online time wasters. This one was sent in by Jamie Pastman. It's an instructional video on watercolor painting by someone called the Bob Ross of Japan. Again, I don't think this is a waste of time at all.
Hi, 今日はね、小型のボートを描いています。まず長四角を描いて、そしてその対角線を結ぶ。ここから立ち上げた、これですね。それを延長したこの線が、このボートの中心線です。ではこの中心線を見ながら、こちらに向かって見える、立方体を描きましょう。こうですね。中心線は少し上に反らせます。そして、その中心線の先端と、この立方体のこの角のところですね。これを結びます。これが、船のへさきですね。そして、このように斜めに形を下ろして結ぶと、ほら、 船になったでしょ。ね、これはどのような船でも大体こういう基本形ですからね。これをしっかり学んでくださいね。余分な線を消したら、ボートですからね、こう座るとこの板を描きます。そして、オールの位置を決めて、あとはね、水に映っているボートの、こんな感じかな。では、塗ってみましょうね。今日は白いボートですので、ちょっと暖色を塗って、下の方ね、ボート丸みを帯びてるので、ちょっとこのくらい暗い感触ですね。ここね、ボートの底、水がね、足につかないように、こう、すのこのようなものを引いてあるんですね。そんな茶色の色を塗りましょう。そして白いボードですけども、今日はちょっとおしゃれに、ね、この、周りのとこね、赤色にしました。こちらは日陰の面ですから、少し暗くて冷たい色です。ほら、ボート。そしてベンチのこの厚みを描いて、すのこの線を加えて、じゃあ、水ですね。水、そうですね。今塗ってるとこは遠い水ですので明るく。手前の水ほどだんだん暗く塗ってきて、少しこのようにね、水が動いた感じするといいですよ。これは、ベンチの影がその子の上に落ちた部分ですね。そして、オールを塗ります。こちらもね。最後に、船の影が水に映ってるんでしたね。ここを塗っています。さあ、どうですか？船がほら、水に浮かんで見えるでしょ？はい。これで出来上がりです。
はい、今回はこの小さいね、ボートを描いてみました。このね、風景描くときに船っていうのは結構厄介な、モチーフなんですね。特に船をこう正面から見た時の形は難しいと思います。ここのね、この辺先っていうか先端のね、形がどうなるかっていうのがつかみにくいんですよね。でもこれもまずは簡単な出発する。そうするとうまく描けると思います。ぜひこの単純なね、まずボートからだんだん、船のね、理解を深めていきましょう。いかがでしたか？これからもね、私と一緒に、水彩を楽しんでいきましょう。それではまた。いかがでしたか？チャンネル登録もよろしくお願いします。